Good evening, everyone. I'm Tony Segreto, and once again, honored to be your moderator for tonight's In the Know Town Hall. We welcome you to the first in a series that we are calling The Science of. And tonight, we will look into the aging brain. It's something I know that many of you are interested in. I know I certainly am. And you also know that the brain is one of the most complex organs in the human body. As mysterious as it is, though, physicians have learned over time that there are things we can do right now to keep our brains healthy as we get older and prevent them from aging. Tonight, brilliant, and I stress again, brilliant minds from the Miller School Department of Neurology will help us explore these topics. They are experts in neurology, neuropsychology, neurogenetics, cognitive training, mindfulness, and much more. Now, they will not only give you an overview of how the brain ages, but also methods for prevention and early detection of age-related changes. This is especially important, as we know now, because we're learning more about the impact of COVID-19 on neurological health. Our panelists tonight include some of the most prominent experts in brain health and cognitive aging. The way I like to put it, you are witnessing tonight the Mount Rushmore of what we have at the University of Miami when it comes to the brain and neurology. Led by Dr. Ralph Sacco, who in addition to being chair of the Department of Neurology at the Miller School, also holds many other roles. Among them, the Olenberg Family Chair in Neurological Disorders, Executive Director of the Evelyn F. McKnight Brain Institute, Director of the Clinical and Translational Science Institute, Senior Associate Dean for Clinical and Translational Science, Miller Professor of Neurology, Public Health Sciences, Human Genetics, and Neurosurgery, and Chief of Neurology Service at Jackson Memorial Hospital. Dr. Sacco is renowned for his work in stroke epidemiology and health disparities. He's also an expert in stroke prevention, its treatment, its risk factors, and its vascular cognitive impairment. He will take part in the question and answer session tonight, along with Dr. Tatiana Rundek, who is the Evelyn F. McKnight Chair in Learning and Memory in Aging, Scientific Director of the Evelyn F. McKnight Brain Institute, Executive Vice Chair of Research and Faculty Affairs in the Department of Neurology, Director of the Clinical and Translational Research in Neurology, Director of the MS Program in Clinical Translational Investigations, and Professor of Neurology and Public Health Sciences at the Miller School. Dr. Rundek's scientific interest includes genetic, epigenetic, and environmental contributions to cerebral vessel and the small vessel disease, stroke, and cognitive decline. Joining her will be Dr. James Galvin, who is the Director of the Comprehensive Program for Brain Health and Professor of Neurology at the Miller School. Dr. Galvin's scientific interests are in early detection and prevention of cognitive decline, including evaluation, non-pharmacologic approaches, and lifestyle factors like proper nutrition. And our final participant is Dr. Bonnie Levin. She is Chief of the Division of Neuropsychology and the Bernard and Alexandria Schrödinger Professor of Neurology at the Miller School. Dr. Levin will talk about the benefits of neuropsychology, all its testing, and when it is important to have memory testing done, aging frailty, as well as the issue of mindfulness. As you can see, it is truly a world-class, you see what I mean about the Mount Rushmore here? This is a world-class group of experts. We are so honored to have them. Now, before we get started, let's go over how you can participate in tonight's conversation. After Dr. Sacco has delivered his opening remarks, all panelists will answer the questions that you've submitted over the last few days. But you will also have the opportunity to submit questions during this program. All you need to do, for those of you who have been with us before, you know the program. For those of you who are new, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the Q&A feature. All you have to do is send us your questions. And a reminder that all the questions submitted will be anonymous. And if we can't get to all of them, we promise we will get them answered for you. Now, it is my honor and my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ralph Sacco. Dr. Sacco, I cannot tell you how honored we truly are to have you, and what a great hour this is going to be, so welcome.
Thank you, Tony. Really, it's great to be here. It's a pleasure. I'm happy to be here with all my colleagues and talking about brain health and brain aging. I'm particularly proud to represent the Department of Neurology at the Miller School, and I want to acknowledge the leadership and faculty members who are really dedicated to advancing neurological health in our community. It's really a remarkable group, and I'm working with some of the people from Mount Rushmore, as you said tonight. So tonight we're here to discuss brain aging. As we all know, an aging brain can often have devastating consequences for patients and those we love and care about, and our family members. In fact, it's one of the things we fear the most as we get older. People are living longer. As we know, we're getting better and better keeping people alive with heart disease. People are living into 80s, 90s. And as we get older, there are the consequences of brain aging. In fact, right now in the United States, there's record numbers of people that are living older. In Florida, as you know, we are impacted particularly hard because we have one of the largest senior populations nationwide. When you compare all the states, we have the greatest proportion of people over age 65. So when we think about aging and living longer, we want to make sure we age well, and particularly that we remain free of neurological disease and cognitive decline. Cognitive decline and fear of loss of memory is one of the most significant concerns of our population. Right now, it's estimated that about 1 out of 3 people will be affected by some age-related brain disease and cognitive decline, particularly dementia or stroke in our lifetime. 1 in 3. That's quite a high number. But besides stroke and dementia, there are other things that happen with age, and we call that age-related cognitive decline or cognitive aging. Some decline that could still occur in how we think and could disrupt our quality of life and our well-being. So we have to be able to consider things that we can do to modify the chances. We also have to do whatever we can today in this current pandemic to be concerned about potential neurological complications of COVID-19. So the good news is that we have a lot of great work and research that have been done on brain health and resilience. And there's a variety of ways that we can significantly lower the risk of age-related brain disease and improve brain health. So my own expertise, as Tony mentioned, is in stroke and vascular disease and brain health. And there's direct correlations between heart health and the brain. Some of the cardiovascular risk factors like high blood pressure and diabetes. We'll talk a little bit more about that in today's program. And I'll talk a little bit about Life's Simple 7, which is an American Heart Association branded campaign about defining ideal cardiovascular health, and it's good for the heart as well as the brain. We're also going to be dealing with diet and exercise, and Jim Galvin is a real expert in this, in brain aging prevention. Jim is going to talk to us more about nutrition and diet as a key lifestyle factor. He's going to introduce to us the mind diet, what we can do to keep our minds healthy, and other things that we can do to prevent or reverse the risk factors for neurodegenerative diseases. Early detection is key, and so Tatiana Rundek is one of our experts in imaging. And the imaging that we can do of the brain can open up new ways to detect and hopefully protect our brain health. With earlier detection, we can come into earlier intervention. So Tatiana will be talking about changes in white matter, which is the deep structures of the brain, small vessel disease, hardening of the arteries, either large arteries or small arteries, that can affect cognitive aging. She's also looking at ways in which people can experience severe aging in the brain and how they can stay free of cognitive decline. And she's been studying the oldest old in terms of severe changes in the brain and what it looks like. And then Bonnie Levin, as you heard, is one of our neuropsychologists, and she can discuss how it's important to consider memory testing for you or a loved one, how rehab might reduce cognitive impairment, cognitive training exercise. And she's also going to discuss the issue of frailty and its relationship to cognitive aging. So these are some of the best experts, are some of my colleagues. I'm happy to be here this evening with them. And hopefully we'll get your questions answered. Tony, back to you.
Dr. Sacco, thank you so much, and thank you for setting the stage as we move into our Q&A portion of this event. So let's turn our attention to those questions that you've submitted over the last couple of days. And Dr. Sacco, you're on stage first here. Here's the question: to what extent, outside of specialized medical intervention, can an individual affect the process of aging? Can that actually happen?
So, aging is tough to truly reverse. I think of the fountain of youth that we all know about and aspire to. And actually being in Miami, Ponce de Leon was the one who looked for the fountain of youth. We don't really have a fountain of youth for brain aging, but there are things that we can do to alter the curves that occur and decline of our brain health with time. And you'll hear more about that from a variety of ways about brain health. The term brain health for us is a term we use that's broad. It can include stroke, it includes dementia like Alzheimer's disease, other neurodegenerative diseases that can cause decline in the brain. It can include cognitive aging, or it can include subclinical changes in the brain that we'll see in an MRI. And so the good news is there's a lot of evidence that we can also kind of retard or slow progression. We may not reverse it. It's not like we can do a brain lift. I know when people think about a facelift to change in appearance, it's harder to do that with the brain. But we have now medicines, we have treatments, and we have a lot of lifestyle factors that we can focus on, and we should focus on as early as we can in life to really promote, improve our resilience, and protect our brain. And I hope we're going to discuss more of that this evening.
Great, Dr. Sacco, thank you. Dr. Levin, welcome. It's nice to see you. Your question is physical frailty inevitable, and how does this relate to cognition as we age?
Physical frailty is one of those terms that everybody's heard of, but until recently, there was just a general medical consensus reached by the American Geriatric Society, which is that it's generally defined as a physiological syndrome characterized by decreased reserve and a diminished resistance. The reason it's important to consider physical therapy, and has actually become one of the sort of major movements that all physical exams now should include an exam of frailty, is that most people want to age in place, and living longer and is living well, and living well is maintaining a non-frail status. The way you define frailties is multiple components. There's weight loss, there's weakness, there's exhaustion, there's slowing down, and there's low activity. So people become frail by a combination of these factors, not all of them or one of them. There's always a combination. The good news about frailty is that you can do something about it, is that the early stages of frailty are called pre-frail, where you might just feel fatigue or you might just be weak. And many, many Americans actually meet one or two of these, and they're completely normal, no cognitive changes at all. And you can actually perform interventions that can reduce these early frailty signs, these pre-frail signs, which can prevent frailty and promote independence. Frailty is linked to cognition. As you become more cognitively impaired, you're more likely to become frail, and as you are frail, you're more likely to develop cognitive impairments, which means it shares a reciprocal relationship. So the important take-home message here is that when you consider well-being, think about the frailty variables that I just mentioned. And it's important to have an accurate assessment of the 5 frailty, we call them symptoms or phenotypes. And then if you are weak, if you are fatigued, if you are losing weight, then there needs to be an active intervention, which we believe is linked to intervening with cognition as well. So you address the frailty symptoms, and then it will negate the negative factors associated with cognitive decline.
Dr. Levin, thank you. Dr. Galvin, welcome. And you get blessed with two questions within one. So it goes like this. How is nutritional status related to brain health and the risk of diseases like Alzheimer's? And what is the mind diet?
Well, I think I'm going to answer it in a couple different ways. First, I think Dr. Sacco later is going to go over all the other sort of components of lifestyle. But nutrition, I like to use the concept of nutrition is really a lifestyle factor. So I don't really like the word diet because people think that they're restricting something. We're really talking about is changing lifestyle. So brain health and diseases like Alzheimer's disease are not monolithic. They're not singular activities, right? There are really multiple paths and ways that we affect our brain as it's aging that can lead us to diseases like stroke or Alzheimer's disease. But the important thing about that, if there are multiple ways to get there, there are really multiple pathways to prevent, to treat, to mitigate the symptoms of the disease. And nutritional status and nutritional lifestyle is really one of those things. What you are, what you eat. And so your brain is very dependent on what you take in. And we know that things that are good for your heart tend to be good for your brain. So diets or nutritional intake that is lean, it's lots of fresh foods, avoiding of high salt foods, avoiding of processed foods where possible. All these things may play an important role. When you think about what we eat as a whole, a balanced diet that our parents told us about when we were children really does make a huge difference. And that's led investigators to develop something called the MIND diet. So the MIND diet is an acronym. What it stands for is the combination of a Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet, which is a dietary approach to stop hypertension. So think about this. It's a diet that will help reduce blood pressure issues. And it's a diet that really comes from the Mediterranean basin. So lots of fish, whole plant foods, grains, legumes like beans or lentils, fruits, nuts, a little bit of red wine. And it's very low in foods that are high processed, high salt. It's rather low in red meats. It's low in butter or stick margarines. And so if we can follow something like this, right, the evidence would suggest that people who have high levels of or high compliance with the MIND diet protect their brains. They have a lower risk to develop diseases like Alzheimer's disease. And if they have memory problems, there's evidence to suggest that those memory problems may progress much slower. So when we approach people, we try to think about lifestyle as a whole, right? And think about diseases like Alzheimer's or stroke as diseases of a lifetime. And so we can build a better brain as we get older.
Dr. Galvin, stay right there because we just had this sent in to us. Is Prevagen a snake oil or does it really improve your memory?
Okay. So I won't call it a snake oil, but I will say it doesn't do anything. And the reason for that is it's a supplement. And supplements are defined as being for quote unquote healthy people, and they're not indicated for the effect on any particular condition. So Prevagen or all of these other over-the-counter products will say lots of things in their ads. And if you turn the bottle over at the very bottom in very fine print, they will all have two statements. One is these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. And two is this product is not intended to treat, diagnose, prevent, or cure disease. So if something is not meant to diagnose disease, treat disease, cure disease, or prevent disease, what's it for? It's for making money for the person who sold it to you.
Doctor, thank you so much. And I like the fact that you mentioned the red wine as well. So thank you for that. Dr. Levin, what are the most important predictors of a cognitive decline, and how do I address them?
So getting back to the physical frailty, that we'll start with sedentary behavior. Sedentary behavior promotes frailty, and this is something that can be actively addressed by maintaining high physical levels of activity. It can be anything. It can be walking. It can be lifting cans of soup up and down. It can be just staying active, not sitting. Besides health factors other than diabetes and controlling blood pressure, which I'm sure Dr. Sacco will be addressing, another prominent predictor of cognitive decline is over-medication, that there are negative outcomes associated with taking lots of medication, which include diminished functional capacity, impaired cognition, falling. These are things that are extremely detrimental to that promote cognitive decline. Also, chronic stress, dealing with it particularly now in a pandemic. Certainly stress goes up in all pandemics, but this has been one particular pandemic which has forced isolation and loneliness, and people are chronically stressed, and it's really important to stay actively engaged with your mind and socially. You have to create resources so that you are not isolated and lonely. Those are two variables that have been linked definitively to cognitive problems over time. People who are aging are very susceptible to cognitive changes due to loneliness. And finally, lack of resources, staying educated, understanding what works and doesn't work. For example, Prevagen. We know that Prevagen is making a lot of money as a commercial product, but it's not really promoting cognition. And that the supplements and the medications that are safe for cognition you should be consulting with your physician.
Dr. Levin, thank you for that. Dr. Rundeck, welcome. It's nice to see you. What are the early stages of an aging brain on brain imaging?
So thank you, Tony. So I just want to, before just give a little bit overview, what happens with aging, right? So with aging, a lot of metabolic changes happens from cellular levels to the organs, and how we age. The brain actually has a pace of aging. And what's happening from the cellular level to anatomical level, the brain starts to shrink with a certain pace and have other changes that are not only structural, what we call, but also functional. The connections between brain cells are getting diminished, or they're getting a smaller number of them, how the brain communicates between each other, it's getting impaired. And then there is a whole vasculature. So the vascular brain, if you will, also starts to get changed. So with very powerful technologies today, mainly MRI or magnetic resonance imaging, as well as carotid ultrasound and others, and with many modalities, we can detect early changes. And those changes can be structural, so we can see shrinking of the cortex of a brain, as well as changes in the white matter. Functional, we can actually see how the connections in the brain are becoming dysfunctional. And then vasculature, which it's really in focus of my research and Ralph's research, and I know Jim as well, and many others, is really to detect early changes in the vessel wall that can change supply to the brain. As you know, the brain changes also in their metabolism. The blood flow becomes slower, but then utilization of the glucose, utilization of the oxygen also can be impaired. So the early changes that we can see on the level of structure, or what we can say brain shrinking on MRI, those are changes in white matter that are mainly due to the vascular supply that is getting smaller and lower, and then changes on the vascular blood, on the vascular vessels. Saying that, I think it's also very important to say that these changes are what we call biological age. And not everybody, the biological age does not need to follow chronological age. So some people are biologically very young, although they chronologically may be old, and other way around. So, and so this is a really an active area of research of mine and my colleagues here and many others to understand this biological aging or brain age and how we can actually improve it so everybody becomes young and sharper regardless of their chronological age.
Dr. Rundeck, stay right there because we have one that was just sent in and the question goes like this. What is the effect of poor sleep on aging and cognitive aging?
Oh, that is an incredibly important question. So sleep is incredibly important for our function, and not just cognitive, physical, but also for the memory consolidation and for many processes in the brain. So poor sleep, whether it is not enough or short sleep, or the quality of sleep. So the phases of the sleep and insomnia and other sleep issues can definitely affect cognition and actually affect all these early changes that we talked about on the imaging, brain imaging, vascular imaging, and other methods as well.
Thank you, Dr. Rudnick. Dr. Sacco, what does the National Academy of Medicine recommend about the best ways to prevent dementia and cognitive decline with age? And you mentioned like the 7 steps that other physicians have been talking about. So could you go into that for us?
Yeah, so as you were hearing from others, diet was mentioned by Jim. There are ways we can protect the brain. The American Heart Association defined what's called ideal cardiovascular health, and they created an acronym for Life's Simple 7. 7 things that I think we all need to work on to protect our heart, protect our blood vessels and prevent stroke, and also to protect our brain. So 3 of them are numbers: blood pressure, blood sugar, and cholesterol. And all 3 of those numbers that can be controlled with lifestyle factors or with medications are critical and are important to get us in the right numbers in our middle or early years. When you're older, it gets harder, and the later you start the control of those things, the harder the impact will be. So blood pressure for hypertension, blood sugar for diabetes, and cholesterol for hypercholesterolemia. 4 of the things in Life's Simple 7 are lifestyle factors. One of them is to not smoke or never smoke. If you do smoke, quit. Obesity, obviously get your weight under control and body mass index. Physical activity, as Dr. Levin mentioned, and the American Heart Association recommends 75 minutes of very active or vigorous physical activity a week, or 150 minutes of, say, more moderate, a fast clip for walking. And then diet. And Jim Galvin went over nicely the MIND diet, the Mediterranean diet, and the AHA in terms of reducing salt. So Life's Simple 7, 4 being health factors, 3 being medication-oriented things that are important for all of us to control. In fact, hot off the press today, there's an article that even people with a high genetic predisposition for dementia, if you have a lot of genetic factors, a family history, you can still reduce that risk with cardiovascular risk factor control. The National Academy of Medicine felt that the most data was on 3 things for controlling and improving age-related cognitive decline and dementia. One of them was high blood pressure and blood pressure control. The other one was on physical activity, a lot of great data on physical activity. It's mentioned by the AHA and mentioned by many others. And the third one was on cognitive training, and I hope we'll go over that a little bit, just like doing crossword puzzles and keeping your mind active and being socially engaged. Those things are going to be critically important for keeping the neurons firing and the brain healthier. And hopefully we'll get a chance to go over that some more.
Dr. Sacco, it's fascinating. Dr. Galvin, with that in mind, what are some of the ways that I can slow memory loss? Does playing a musical instrument help?
Sorry. I think what you're hearing from all of us, right, is that there's no one thing that can be done, but it's really thinking about overall lifestyle. So it's keeping yourself mentally active, physically fit, socially engaged, eating a healthy diet, right? So if you've never played an instrument, picking up and learning something new is very novel and stimulating to the brain. That can be protective. I don't think it's limited to music or to poetry or to going to plays. I think it's really looking at the overall package of lifestyle. How can I, am I physically active? If not, should I start? Yes. And if I'm doing it, I need to do more. Am I eating healthy? If I'm not, I want to start. And if I am, I want to continue that. Am I being socially engaged? If I'm not, I want to start. And if I am, what else can I do? And so there's no perfect number for any one person. So it's very personalized, and we're in the era of personalized or precision medicine, and we could apply those principles to things like brain aging as well. You know, looking at each individual, what all their risk factors are, what their lifestyle is, what medicines they have, and how could we reduce risk, promote health, increase healthful behaviors, and manage comorbid or coexisting diseases. And all of those things come into play. So yes, it can help, but there's lots of other things we can do to help.
Thank you, Dr. Galvin. Dr. Levin, is it possible to reboot the brain and turn around aging?
We can't stop aging, but you can absolutely enhance your quality of life and improve the aging process. And you know, we're all going to age, we all age, but there are all kinds of things that we've talked about today that promote healthy aging. So rather than reverse, I think about it as slowing the aging process down and promoting health building skills. So I'm asked a lot about how do you do this in terms of programs like Luminosity. We're asked very frequently about prescribed programs that you see either on TV or on your Instagram, or you see them advertised in magazines. So the general rule of thumb is that the way to promote engaged aging is to engage your brain in activities where you immerse yourself and not just practice something on a computer screen, because that doesn't generalize. And that's why luminosity has been called into question. It's not that it hurts you, it's just that does it achieve the desired effect? The answer is it entertains you, but our best evidence comes from people who are acquiring a new skill, where they're engaged with life. You acquire a new skill, you might want to start learning music, listening to music more, learning a language, stimulating activities that keep you interacting and engaged.
Thank you, Dr. Levin. Dr. Rundeck, does brain shrinkage in and of itself predict cognitive decline?
Thank you for this question, Tony. So there are two parts of answer here. So the studies, numerous studies looked at the shrinkage of the brain and correlation with cognition. And yes, there is a correlation. Saying that, that does not apply to every individual. So in the studies of the oldest old, the studies that investigators here who are with us today performed, that is not inevitable. So there are people, especially who are in those age groups, that actually have developed cognitive and brain reserve and resilience. And that necessarily does not relate the shrinkage of brain into the cognitive issues or cognitive decline. And Ralph and Jim and Bonnie can tell you that when we review the images of our brains and people who are in 80 plus cohort that we follow at University of Miami, we are sometimes very surprised that we see a lot of changes in the brain, but cognitively, those people are functioning perfectly. And I go back to Bonnie and I ask her all the time, how is that possible, Bonnie? You're telling me that your cognitive testing is completely normal, and look at the brain of that person. So there is a lot of that we need to learn, and a lot of that we know. What we know is there is cognitive resilience, there is a brain reserve that people can develop, some genetically, some with taking approaches that Jim just talked, which is comprehensive lifestyle approach that can probably increase this cognitive reserve and resilience and reduce your biological aging. So it's not inevitable that shrinkage will relate into the cognitive issues.
Thank you, Dr. Rundick. Dr. Sacco, is there a relationship between brain health and COVID-19?
Well, that's an important question, given what we're dealing with now. I would say, first of all, we're not entirely sure yet. There's a lot we're learning about COVID-19 every day. COVID-19 does affect the nervous system. One of the early symptoms, as you know, is possibly loss of smell and loss of taste. Those are neurological functions. If people are severely ill, delirium occurs, and that can be an alteration of consciousness. Strokes have been known to occur because with COVID-19, you can get hypercoagulable clotting of the blood. And that can be in larger arteries or even small arteries. You can have bleeding in the brain, and if there's bleeding in the brain, there's going to be neurological abnormalities. You also can have encephalomyelitis, which is an inflammation or in the brain cells, which then can impair your ability to talk, your ability to walk, your ability to do other neurological functions. Those are some of the earlier things. We're still not sure of the long-term consequences. We hope we're not going to see long-term effects in the brain, but we just don't know. There are a variety of number of research studies that are ongoing and getting started. Some of us are getting involved in these studies. We will be looking at the long-term consequences, not just the early acute manifestations of COVID-19, but long-term impact on cognition, on brain health, on other neurological conditions like even gait. So I think we still don't have the full answers. There are concerns out there, and there's a need for more research for us to truly understand this and do what we can. Obviously, if somebody has a neurologic condition and then gets COVID-19, they also can worsen. But we're worried more about if somebody is in good health and gets COVID-19, are there going to be brain health repercussions later? We still don't know.
Dr. Sacco, stay right here because we had this question just sent to us. What is the connection between Parkinson's disease and Lewy body dementia?
Well, I am not the best person to answer that, and there are great questions, and I'm happy to say we have one of the world's expert on Lewy body disease and dementia, and that's Jim Galvin. So I'm going to turn that one over to Jim.
Oh, thanks, Dr. Sacco. So Lewy body is the pathology in the brain. So it's describing one of the abnormal clumps of protein that occurs in the brain. And so Parkinson's disease has Lewy body, so it's a Lewy body disease. There is also a type of disorder called dementia with Lewy bodies, which is someone who presents with a dementia, a cognitive problem that has Lewy bodies. And Parkinson's patients are at a much higher risk for developing dementia. So they're all under this umbrella term of Lewy body dementia. So both Parkinson's disease dementia and dementia with Lewy bodies are both Lewy body dementias. Is the second most common cause of degenerative dementia after Alzheimer's disease, and affects about 1.4 million Americans. So it's probably the most common disease that many people have never heard of. Most of what we've heard about recently are famous stars who have passed away who've had Lewy body dementia, such as Robin Williams, Tom Seaver recently passed away and had Lewy body dementia. So there are a number of people that we hear in the news, but it's actually a much more common disorder than we thought.
Dr. Gatlin, stay here because this goes with one of the questions that was submitted a couple of days ago. And the question goes like this: genetic testing shows that I have a slight risk of Alzheimer's. What does that mean in the likelihood of actually getting it? And is genetic testing helpful to detect early aging of the brain?
Right. So great question. So genes are funny. So genes 101 in terms of dementia, there are risk genes and cause genes. So there are genes that if you have this abnormal gene, you're going to get the disease. Luckily for dementia, that's very rare. It's about 2% of all cases. Most cases are what we call sporadic. They occur randomly in the population. Now there are risk genes. That means that if you carry one of these genes, the most common one being something called the ApoE gene, if you carry one of these genes, it puts you at a higher risk of getting diseases like Alzheimer's disease than if you don't carry it. But there are people who don't carry it who develop disease, and there are people who have the gene who don't. So it's not a perfect prediction. What it tells us, though, is that if you carry one of these genes and you're a higher risk, this is where all of the things that we've been talking about so far, all of these measures that people can take can make a huge difference. So let me just give a number, right? So there are things that we cannot modify. We cannot modify our age, we cannot modify our sex, and we cannot modify our genes, right? And that explains a proportion of the risk of dementia. But up to 40% of the risk of dementia are things that we have direct control over. Our cognitive activity, our physical activity, our social engagement, our mindfulness, managing our other diseases, eating a healthy diet. These are things that we have direct control. And I think all the messages that you've heard tonight is that, you know, we at UM can work with you to try to help you get control on these things. And so I think it's a really important message to take.
Let me jump in here, Tony, if I may, because this is exactly what the study was showing that I mentioned. Even those at the highest risk, what we call the E4 or multiple genetic factors, if they control diabetes, if they didn't smoke, if they had better blood pressure or diet, they were able to keep their 10-year risk of dementia lower. So genes are not kind of a fatal cause for you to be thinking about. There's still ways, as Jim said, to really modify that risk.
Thank you, doctors. And that 40% is really a remarkable number. It truly is. So thank you both. Dr. Rundeck, why do some people experience relatively little aging of the brain, or so it appears?
Right. So some people are very biologically young, and that is a really sort of entity that we can image with neurological imaging, either MRI or either vascular imaging. And so the research actually just started, and there are a couple of national studies that are investigating the super agers. So those are the people who are over age of 80, 85, but they are brilliant and their brain is working 100%. And so our goal is really to understand what are the factors and the factors of resilience that those people have, as well as what are the environmental factors, and in other words, what are they doing right during their life so they can stay healthy and young through their lives. So the research just started, but at the beginning of this research, one thing we know for sure, and that is that those people, super agers, they follow a lot of those rules in the lifestyle. They definitely engage in social, physical activities, and they're very active. So every super agers are still working, they're still participating in a lot of activities, whether they're social, intellectual, or any other. There's some even actively working, even in their ages of 90s. So several studies have shown that the activity, and so although there are some genes, some people are lucky to have some good longevity genes, but most of us probably can achieve that younger biological aging by taking into account all the factors that we are talking about, including healthy and sleep that we need.
I would like to also add that I'm working on the oldest old study that, with everyone here. And one of the common features of healthy aging among the oldest old is that they just have this remarkable sense of self-satisfaction. They do not live in regret. And another factor that we studied and came out was that they have a defined sense of purpose. So they wake up and they have things to do. And it's all kinds of things. There's not one thing, but it's multiple things that keep you engaged. But that sense of mastery and that sense of purpose promotes independence. And again, this whole concept of living longer, living well, and aging in place.
And Dr. Levin, while I have you here, one of the questions that was submitted a few days ago goes like, how can practicing mindfulness actually help me?
So mindfulness has really taken hold in the last decade and has been, it's gone very mainstream. It came out of a meditative practice and it is now has a wide application for people who are experiencing stress, who just want to learn how to center their attention, to relax. Mindfulness really is about the awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the moment in a non-judgmental way. There's sort of two components. The first component involves self-regulating of attention so that it's maintained on the immediate experience. So you let all those distractions that pop into your head while you're in a relaxed position, focused on your breathing, and you let them come in and you let them go. And the second part is that as these things come and go, you are focused on the experience of being in the present at the moment, in the moment, and you greet these thoughts with curiosity, a sense of openness, and acceptance. So mindfulness promotes sort of a multi-tiered integrative experience so that it is relaxing, it is focusing, it is directing attention in a non-judgmental way. It's a really great practice to get involved with to promote healthy aging. It brings calmness, it brings a sense of perspective. It's something that is easily learned. You can do it virtually or in person. And there's some YouTube videos, but there's also people who are practiced in mindfulness training. And we have a group here at the university in our division that run groups in mindfulness. And we've had a lot of success.
Thank you, Dr. Levin. This question was sent to us and really sent to the entire panel. So we'd like you all to weigh in on this, if you would, please. With the push to legalize marijuana becoming so prevalent now all over the country, is there any concern with what this will end up doing to the brains of users as they age, especially those using it since adolescence? Dr. Sacco, would you like to lead us off with that?
Sure. There are concerns, particularly about younger people. And the younger that one deals with marijuana, and especially in larger quantities, the more potential effects there are. There have been studies that have shown that, for example, for stroke risk, it may go up in people who smoke marijuana. We do know that certain drug use that may combined with marijuana may be an issue. So it's probably how much, how often, and at what age. On the other hand, there are some protective things we know, anti-inflammatory effects. Dr. Levin has been analyzing some of them for traumatic brain injury, not just marijuana, but CBD that is part of it. But I would say in higher doses, it can cause trouble, particularly in younger brains. And it's like everything, too much may be problemsome. But happy to have others comment. And it's also an area of active research that we are trying to look more into. Bonnie has her hand up. Go ahead, Bonnie.
We've done some research in this, and it's a topic of great interest at the university level, of course. Data suggests that users that begin in adolescence around age 14 to about 27, actually, there's some good data showing that it interferes with some very important brain development. So at the time when the brain is myelinating, getting more specialized, certain things are getting laid down that you need for the rest of your life that is still occurring. Brain development occurs well into the late 20s. And so smoking marijuana at that age is particularly deleterious. And that's been confirmed by multiple studies. Of interest, and the reason this is such an important question, is that marijuana is the most frequently used illicit drug by older adults. The population of users is growing among our age group. People 50 and older seem to be, and particularly 65 actually and older, but 50 and older seem to be the group that's growing in marijuana usage. The truth is very little is known in older age about how it affects individuals. We know that low CBD, that high CBD, but low THC content is probably, the healthiest. Too much THC gives you that feeling of getting high, but you can actually take CBD doses that have minimal amount of THC. But the health effects are not well studied. And so at this point, I think we know it's specifically harmful in younger age groups. And the data's it's not really all in about older individuals.
Dr. Galvin?
Yeah, and what's interesting is that the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine put out a combined report about 5 years ago, which looked at all of the available literature on marijuana and marijuana products for various medical conditions. And what was clear from the evidence is that there are really only positive studies for marijuana in narrow angle glaucoma, treating nausea and vomiting due to cancer chemotherapeutic agents and chronic pain. Outside of that, the studies are either inconclusive or that marijuana has deleterious effects on health, many conditions, including a lot of neurological conditions. So, I think research is ongoing. We need to understand this and whether it's particular components of marijuana that may have benefits rather than marijuana itself. I think the jury's still out, but it's really hard to make a recommend. I find it really hard to make a recommendation to my older adults without any evidence that it's really taking care of any of the problems that people may be using it for. Even if anecdotally they say they feel better, I'm looking at their brain and their cognition, and I can tell you that it's probably not. But I think the jury's still out, but the body of evidence from the National Academy suggests that it really doesn't have the panacea benefits that we all thought it would.
Thanks, Dr. Galvin. Dr. Rundick, you want to weigh in on this?
Yes, just to add, we would love to study. So if we can have sort of support to study groups of people that are using marijuana in older age, we would love to study and see what's happening with their brains and what's happening with overall aging in those individuals. And so as Bonnie said, if it's so prevalent, that may be one of the important clues also for some cognitive deterioration and poor cognitive outcomes. So we need more studies. I think that's what I would like to add. And I know among our super agers, in our studies, they are not marijuana users. So maybe that's also a little clue right there.
Dr. Sacco, can you highlight how philanthropy has and can support advancements in research and care?
So that's an excellent question, Tony. Philanthropy is critical to so much of our research mission. I often feel philanthropy can help obviously build buildings, but it also helps invest in people and the smartest minds in our department to give them the protected time. One of the highest honors is obviously an endowed chair. An endowed chair is amazingly important to then support people like Dr. Rundeck, Dr. Galvin, Dr. Levin, to do the kind of work that they can do because it protects time. Philanthropy can also help important innovative research questions, like we just talked about with marijuana and cognitive effects, because sometimes those kind of things will not be funded by the government. So philanthropic support to support the brightest minds doing great work, innovative work, and projects that are cutting edge. Often philanthropic support will be pilot funding to get an investigator going, a young investigator that then can break through because they get the important pilot data answered, and then they can apply for larger grants from the NIH. So I know many of you are out there and have been phenomenally great supporters of the university, and some even of our own department, and we appreciate everything you do. It's critical to our mission. We cannot do what we have to do for our mission without your support.
Thank you, Dr. Sacco. Dr. Rundeck, what are the best exercises? Like, is something as simple as reading a brain exercise, or are there better suggestions that you might have?
Oh, that's a difficult question for me. I would not isolate to one. I would say that all of that can count, and I believe Bonnie can speak more about it, but I think engagement, the physical engagement, and that means even hobbies and dancing and doing some work around the yard. I mean, those are all physical exercises that can help, playing golf, playing tennis, whatever people like to engage with the mind, like reading, anything that can sort of exercise your brain, or if you will, brain gymnastic. And that can be anything that you can actually need to use that you need to actually construct and use and exercise your brain actively, not passively. So some solutions that you need to write some solutions as a puzzles, playing cards. So all of those actually help exercise the brain. But I would refer also to Bonnie, who does a lot of those trainings and therapies.
Dr. Levin, would you like to weigh in?
Sure. I think the rule of thumb is that the brain likes novelty. And so if you do the same thing every day, you start to, what we say, habituate. Your brain gets too used to it. The way to stimulate your brain is novelty, novelty, novelty. So that's why learning a language, learning a musical instrument, seeking out new social relationships, deeply engaging, that's novel. And those are the best, highly recommended ways to promote not only brain health, but just general life satisfaction as well.
Thank you, Dr. Levin. Wow, this hour has flown by. Dr. Sacco, we would love your final thoughts.
So again, thank you, Tony, for having us. I feel bad we couldn't get to all the questions. There's so many more questions out there, and it's important, and we really appreciate your interest. We tried to do the best we can, but we hope we'll have another opportunity to answer the questions. I'm so proud of the faculty that I have here, that I work with here tonight, as well as the other faculty in my department. We are really committed to maintaining the best and improving brain health. Their enthusiasm, commitment, and expertise reflect the kind of drive that we need to successfully uncover the innovative methods to protect brain health. And as I mentioned before, philanthropic support is so critical to our mission. It's the only way we can ensure that these great people will have the best resources and infrastructure to pursue the most novel therapies. I also want to acknowledge the generosity of the Board of Trustees, the leadership, and thank all of our faculty, staff, and loyal donors. You continue to help us set new standards of care. We're here to help you. Your support is life-saving, and we're here for you if you need us. Hopefully you'll know how to find us. We want everyone, including the faculty, to play an essential role in our fight against brain aging and elevate the level of care we provide to keep patients healthy and safe. So stay safe during these really difficult times. Look out for one another. And please remember Life Simple 7. There are ways that we can protect the brain, and you can age with a healthy brain. Thank you, and thank you, Tony, for moderating.
Oh, it's my honor and my pleasure, Dr. Sacco. Thank you. And what an amazing evening, right? I mean, the aging brain has become such a huge issue worldwide. And I think you'll agree that we have the best of the best right here at the University of Miami. No doubt we all really learned a lot tonight. And for all of those who joined us, I hope you were as impressed as I continue to be with all of our doctors and all of our leaders at the University of Miami throughout our entire medical system. Their unyielding passion, their expertise, and their heartfelt caring is the reason why we continue to be a destination for those who are going through medical issues of all kinds. And thank you all for participating in tonight's In the Know Town Hall. Please remember that a full recording of this program will be posted online, and you can look for that link in the coming days. And if you would like to support the Department of Neurology, we will include a link in that follow-up email that you'll receive. Also, in just a moment, you will see a survey about tonight's town hall on your screen. Please, we urge you, just take a minute to submit your feedback. And I trust you, trust me, it doesn't take longer than a minute. Because what this will do, this will help us understand your interests and improve our program. And as always, we wish you and your family good health, stay safe, and remember, it's all about the you. Good night, everyone.